Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of Mocast. Yes, we're still calling it that, although you might have noticed that it has been changed to being a very specific podcast, talking with all of the big brains from the Discord, classes, theory crafters, highly experienced players and all of that. And today, Flame, what are we looking at?
We have one of my personal favorites, Unholy DK. And we have a couple of faces you might have seen before. Hello, guys.
It's been a long time, guys. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
So we have Banter, we have Taze, and we have Biceps, because I know we did the Frost DK with the boys, but I think it's pretty safe to say that these boys are into like all of the DK specs to an extent.
Oh yeah.
And I know Biceps especially is a very unholy man. DK, sorry.
DK.
Yeah.
DK.
he has a lot of experience, and by the way, he did post out a brand new video in terms of Covenant, so you should check that out. We'll talk a little bit about that. And we are going to talk a lot about Unholy DK. We're going to get into probably some 9.1 things, past, present, future, all of that, pretty much more or less the same format as the last time.
Yeah, the difference is as clearly, depending on when you're watching these Mocasts, right now we actually have a lot more info about the 9.1 changes and what we're going to have in. And
yes.
I know Taze here has been hinting and teasing at a couple really cool things that we at least want to mention during the podcast about Frost as well. So if you're still interested in Frost, you might find something for your liking here. But let's get on with it, boys. For anybody that doesn't know already, can you guys do like a quick intro?
Very quick. Or they can just check the Frost DK one. But we can go through a little bit. Just a tad, just a tip. You go ahead, Banter. I see you. You're a determined man. Let's go.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Banter. I'm very underslept. And I am an admin on the Death Knight Discord, also known as Acaris. And I love DK.
That's why we're here.
Hello, I'm Taze. I'm theory crafter for the Acaris Discord. I do a lot of stuff that you'll never see. Also study psychology. Gonna talk about some cool stuff today, though.
Oh yeah, cannot wait. Who's this?
Who's that shaven face? The only shaven face.
Hey guys, Bicepspump here. I'm the Wildhead DK DPS writer, both Frost and Unholy. I also make video guides, I stream on Twitch, and I'm a useful minion in the Acaris Discord. I'm also heavily involved in the theory crafting of DKs, not as much as I used to do. I know Taze has taken over a lot of my previous responsibility, especially when it comes to writing the action priority list for the simulation craft.
I mean, somebody has to stream more and show the people the proper way to play Unholy DK.
Yeah,
so
you can catch Biceps.
It's a good dynamic. It's a very good dynamic. I think just to add, I know Taze mentioned he's into psychology. I'm pretty sure a lot of the people from our community know Banter is teaching game development.
Yeah.
But
that is correct. Yeah.
But yeah, Biceps. What did you study, my friend? Can you talk about what you studied or?
Sure. Yeah. I did a Master of Physics, specialized in biophysics and quantum information processing.
Right.
So that's what you need to be able to play Unholy.
I'll see myself out. Thank you very much.
Now I work with data science in the financial industry.
Wow.
So it's quite disjointed from.
It's been a long time since there were so many words at once that I didn't understand.
I mean, if we were to do the podcast as we used to do it, I would get into that shit with all the words.
That would be so cool.
Tell me more.
But
Biceps.
I mean, on the same vein, we can talk about Unholy. It's probably gonna turn out the same way.
For me, it's gonna be the same as I don't think I ever played Unholy in my life. So this is gonna be a very educational show for me.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, let's hop into it. Let's actually go a little bit into what the 9.1 kind of has in store, because a lot of people might be interested with the 9.1 coming out just around the corner. Although we might not have
it's not the clear picture. We have a couple of things and we can get into those, but I think the boys will agree that we have to disclaim this. Things will change. Nothing will be concluded here, just a nice discussion on what is happening so far.
Otherwise, we could just dig a grave for boomies.
Well, let's not get into that. All right. So, okay, thoughts. Let's get into like a little bit of a thought process. Like, well, what do you guys think of what's been data mined so far at 9.1 and what's changing for for Unholy, anybody can start chipping in and we can develop from there.
Well, let's
I can
start
start
simple.
off. Or
Go ahead, Bicep.
I love that shit.
Oh.
I love it.
Fine. So let's just start simple. The new legendaries. They're how do I put it? They're not good. So when it comes to the new legendaries, they may seem cool or seems like they may be powerful in a specific situation. They don't really do anything special. They may have some niches, but not really worth looking into too much.
Yeah, I disagree with that sentiment. There's one new legendary for each covenant. And I feel like, if someone were to give me a task and say to me, you need to create one new legendary for each covenant, which is associated with covenant abilities, what has come out is kind of sensible from my point of view. You can't do a ton of things using the covenant abilities and like adding on top of them. So I feel like the released legendaries are fine. They are pretty interesting in their own way when related to the covenant abilities, but they're not very powerful. And I also kind of like that. I think it would be rather detrimental if we come out and you see like, oh, Night Fae got a new legendary, which is now Abyss. So just let everyone jump onto the Night Fae train, even if you don't want to swap Covenant. It is better that they release new interesting legendaries, which are better. So whoever who doesn't care too much about throughput, they can pick them up and play with them and can have fun with them. And then players playing at the very high end that are very careful and very mindful about throughput, they don't really need to bother about it.
The new legendaries are fucking shit. They're poorly designed. They're boring. Like,
Well, I mean,
it feels like an intern made these. In all honesty, like,
Really? I mean,
it's just this parameter is increased by this much, or you get one resource. Like, they're so boring. Like, I understand that like you might have more blood decays in Venthyr. So why does it not do something more interesting for like blood decay? Like, I understand it has like a healing component, but they're just not interesting, in my opinion. Then there needs to be like some kind. So the idea is that the ability from the Covenant is like a bit of a toy, right? So we go into the stuff in game design, like the idea of a toy. What the legendaries should be doing is making something that is different versatility wise. So the same way we have like Super Strain, right? In your Torghast. If you're playing Unholy, you can actually get a Torghast power that has a frost damage component to it if you run the Super Strain legendary, or you can get some other way to get frost damage out. I think that type of interaction is where the legendaries should be going, especially with Covenant legendaries. Not basically just picking a parameter and turning it up one tick.
Oh, I totally agree. I think whenever it comes to game design, be it WoW or anything, Blizzard had some interesting ideas when they altered how certain mechanics of a spec worked with adding a legendary or another type of system, and obviously that would be the ideal one. And at the same time, I'm looking at the legendaries from the perspective of somebody who plays all three specs, and I was like, I really don't want to feel like I need to switch to Night Fae for Frost or to Venthyr for Blood. So, I mean, what kind of legendaries will they be doing? Could they be doing to make sure that the Covenant's balance don't seem too skewed? Although they seem to have been doing an okay job so far, I guess. There's very few classes where there's like, okay, you take this Covenant and you just totally forget about the rest. Like, I don't know exactly how the latest sims are for Unholy when it comes to, Covenant choices ran against each other. I knew that last time when we did our research for Unholy and talked with you guys, some of them were pretty close. I don't know like how the standing is now and how it looks in 9.1. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about that if it's changed in any way.
So I just started getting the data for this, but only thing that I'm seeing right now is there's two kind of major outliers when it comes to 9.1, and that happens to be Pelagos for Kyrian and Hymar for Necrolord. Otherwise, everything else kind of falls behind. Unholy doesn't benefit much from a third potency conduit like a lot of other specs, namely Obliteration for Frost. Just a hint there for you guys. So When it comes down to it, those that get those 2 extra throughput slots in the soulbind trees, like Pelagos and Highmark, just gain so much more benefit overall than what you'd get from taking a third potency.
I mean, I can see a combat meditation being good for. Is combat meditation one of the main reasons why you would want Pelagos, or is this something new that I haven't caught up on?
So there's actually a new trait that he has that increases your strength by 12% just randomly throughout the fight. But 12% strength, that's also multiplicative with Unholy Strength. It kind of gets a little bit extreme if they're both up at the same time.
Ooh.
But as for Unholy, Pelagos isn't like super far out ahead just because it's on his major buff's on a 60-second cycle, and Unholy doesn't really align with that. So Pelagos isn't like insane. That's kind of where Highmark comes in.
I feel like Pelagos specifically, he's just strong for everyone. There isn't something specific that aligns Pelagos with Unholy. It's just that Pelagos works with everything, and it's just generally the best covenant for, or just the soulbind in Korean. And now we then get 2 extra throughput abilities, which is a bit interesting. With the 1.9 changes, what they did was essentially they attached 1 potency, and then at the bottom there's a throughput spell for the soulbind, and that formula applies to pretty much everything except Pelagos and Eomer, and they then obviously become somewhat outliers.
Sorry.
Nadia Faventa is also, I think she's going to be okay, because again we get the 2 top potency, we have the ability that buffs your rune forges, and then her final one is also pretty good. It has essentially the exact same value as the first spell in the tree, and that already is like an okay soulbind spell.
Yeah, I could definitely see it getting a lot of use in AoE if you're Vent there.
Just on the note of like people swapping to like Kyrian, right? I'd say like roughly half of the people who are Kyrian, or Kyrian is their base, is literally just because Peli God X is just amazing. And now they're just making him even better. So I find that a bit weird. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think it's most of the first soulbinds from the Covenants, I don't know, maybe this was a philosophy for them to just have it, especially Kyrian. I feel like Kyrian had most appeal for a lot of people, and it seems like in general terms for most classes, the first soulbind is always tends to be the pretty good. Look at Nia from the fairies, the Night Fae. And you know, there's Pelagos for Kyrian, there's Nadia for Ventus. Like the first soulbinds always tend to be the best for some reason.
It's interesting, and one of the things that they have in common, at least Nia with Pelagos, at least in 905, is that their main mastery buff procs with the ability usage. So, because I'm thinking right now, that's why I mentioned combat meditation, but you know, I mean, whatever 9.1 brings is probably gonna end up being simp first. I don't know with what iteration the final Pelagos will be, because just looking at while we do like guides for pretty much all the specs, a lot of the specs that like Pelagos probably like Nia for the same reason, is that you just want that mastery funnelist, whereas even if your spec doesn't really like mastery that much, having that amount of mastery that often is just way too good. Like Demolux using Nia for HP buff. Although the mastery is still good, but Demolux don't really, I guess they do want mastery to an extent, but you know, that's a whole other topic.
I think I would add to that any good chunk of a secondary stat will be good. I'll just put this in like a parenthesis. After talking with Whisper from Ravenhold, he basically, I don't know if you guys agree, but it tends to make sense. He basically said that Blizzard could any day just swap out the names Critical Strike, Haste, Mastery, Versatility with damage, and any stat, right? If you get a good chunk of it, just means at the end of the day more damage. So this is why Nia, Pelagos, this, you know, a big chunk of mastery, sure, it's
more damage. Yeah, I feel like in order for them to like move away from that concept, they would have to like redesign mastery. I feel like they were probably on the money with mastery, where they can define the playstyle of a spec with their mastery, but it ended up something like no offense, like Unholy has what is just like a flat damage increase, which is great that it makes the spec viable, but I mean, how interesting is that, a flat damage increase? It's
hang on, are you saying that secondary stats aren't interesting? Is that what you're saying?
Who said what? Come on, man.
said that?
We talked about this. Fuck. No, but I remember you guys, Taze and Banter, had a really awesome idea of a sort of a mechanic that I think would have worked well with a possible example of a new mastery system, like interactable, because all specs have some sort of, I don't know, interaction with, okay, if you have more crit, then this can pop off, you get one more rune or whatever, no seal fate for rogues and shit like that. So there is this flavorish thing, but it's still at the end of the day translates to just flat out more damage. You can put it in however, in vortex it however you want. At the end of the day, it could be just damage.
Yeah.
While it's interacting with it more would make a difference, right? Like actually playstyle shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
Was that the Frost Mastery thing?
Yeah, we talked about it.
remember.
The first.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool actually.
Oh,
You know,
Yeah, it was
just-
like % chance to.
Yeah, like your
apply,
target
like, some-
decaying to frost damage and
Yeah, I think it consumed the Razor Ice buff to do like big damage or something like that. It was a % chance to do that or something.
it was.
I can't remember exactly.
And anything along the lines of that was pretty cool. And just before we move on, because I see like we're moving on a little bit into the classes, and I do want to mention something, guys. In ending with the Covenant discussion on Unholy, if you want, you can check Bicep's video out. He talks a little bit more about Covenant,
Yeah.
right? He's not gonna tell you what's going on. You're just gonna have to go watch.
It's in the description, by the way, so you can go check that out. And anything in depth related in terms of Unholy DK, videos, I would definitely recommend checking out Biceps stream and YouTube, all in the description, boys.
Now, back on topic. I was actually talking with Taze the other day on the stream about Necrotic Plague, mostly because I kind of missed the mark. I kind of skipped probably one of the cooler periods of playing Unholy, and I'm salty now that I heard about it. And we're kind of moving into a direction where, okay, let's talk a little bit about how Unholy is designed. Like, and we can start with, in the same veins as Frost, is like, when do you guys think Unholy had like its best moments? Either in terms of performance or at least in design, in the sense of like, oh, this was so interesting to play. Because I remember trying to manage death runes, and I feel like that was such an interesting concept. It feels so simple now, but it was like probably a lot cooler than what we have in the game right now, to some extent.
Hell yeah. Can I start?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. What Unholy DK was the best it has ever been, ever. Bar none. Not even close. You had two main play styles. You had Necrotic Plague, as Taze just said. And for those who don't know what it is or how it played, pretty much think of it like you had to keep a Mage Ignite buff up for as long as possible. And you had to figure out on the fly if you needed to prolong the debuff or just use your resources to just do damage other than trying to prolong the debuff. And then there was other like really cool tricks you could do, like trying to so it was a stacking debuff, and you could let the debuff drop off because you had an ability that could basically get it back up to its maximum stacks very quickly. So there was a lot of cool little tricks you could do there. You had to have very deep knowledge of the fight and the encounters to min-max it properly. So sometimes you would actually let it drop early so you could build it back up so it will last longer. And then when a bunch of ads come out in a a Beast Lord type fight, probably the best example, all the ads have the debuff for a long duration. But on the other hand, and at the same time, you had Breathless Indragosa for Unholy, which was just front loading all of your burst as hard as you can go. It played a bit like Current Breath, but it was just so much more fun, in my opinion.
But
Yeah.
when was this? What time frame we're talking here?
This was basically WoD, specifically Blackrock Foundry. It was probably when it was the best, but it was still prevalent in Hellfire Citadel.
Right.
Oh man,
And it was also buffed. Yeah, and it was also assisted by things like multi-strike and stuff like that, which was a cool
Multi-strike.
stat.
Yeah.
What an interesting stat we used to have, right? Well, was that the stat that had the chance to strike twice, or am I mistaken?
Yeah.
It was
So
replaced with haste, right? Or
no, it just got deleted.
Yeah,
It's like, this is causing
was
too
that
many
too.
issues. Let's just get rid of it. Yeah, I think it was like if you got a multi-strike proc, you got like more runic power or something like that. I think that's how it worked. Something like that. And then you had trinkets which increase your multi-strike by a ridiculous amount. So you could actually guarantee like specific points of where your multi-strike would just be probably going to proc more often. So you would just have assume that you would have more runic power generation within these windows. And that was really cool gameplay. That was fun gameplay. It was interesting. Unlike now.
I remember specifically leveraging pinch whistle nitro fuel. If you don't remember, this is a beverage you drink. It makes you drunk. And if you stand close to some fiery thing, it deals damage to you. And back in the day, that was magic damage, which you could AMS to gain runic power. So what you do is drink pinch whistle nitro fuel, get drunk. Your character actually gets drunk. And then you have this fire stand next to you. And you can leverage that to have huge amount of runic power at the start of an encounter. And you pretty much had to do that to min-max properly. You might have seen it in Rectroy's latest video. He actually used that to one-shot people to kill himself. But nowadays, you can't use it in combat. It doesn't deal damage to you. I actually looked into that for the Theater Pain boss. You know, when you go into arena to kill each other. It would be quite nice to use pinch whistle and then just kill yourself. So you have to get that up quickly.
Yep.
But they fixed that for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify what Bicep said. Yeah, so basically you set yourself on fire, and because fire is a magic type, you put anti-magic shell on, and then at the time anti-magic shell gave you runic power, and you could start combat at 100 runic power, for example. And then like the other strategy was, I think it was called the pool party strat, where you like dipped into like a lava in an arena, so like Archimond, for example, in a Hellfire Citadel, just to get 100 runic power.
They fixed a lot of that, which is good to some degree. Like you can't gain runic power from environmental damage sources. So most fire on the ground, which you walk into, which deals magic damage to you, that doesn't generate runic power. It has to be like a direct hit where the boss deals a big AoE or whatever. Which is good because it's kind of detrimental to have the Unholy players run around and running into shit on the ground to get runic power. Don't want to have that.
It was definitely degenerative gameplay.
Anti-magic was like, Bob, where are you going? The boss here. Nah, man, I got this.
Don't stand in the fire.
I got a
warning. No. Pretty cool. That's actually pretty cool.
I must say, from my point of view, Antris Unholy was my favorite Unholy. I was very much into the Dark Arbiter gameplay. Obviously, big variants. You know, you had those awful ones which just didn't deal any damage. But when you'd got a good one, Jesus Christ, that was awesome. I still remember, second heroic clear, I had this like insane Dark Arbiter on the very mattress, the single target patchwork fight. Like I was top 1 for weeks after that. That was just insane. I've never gotten that many crits ever.
Without power
it kind of correlates. I played at a somewhat high level, higher than I had used to. And I got great logs, so that's obviously going to bias my view on it. But I loved Antris Unholy. It was so much fun. Great.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, Bicep, except, I don't know, I liked it a little bit more in Tomb, just because of the tier set bonus that you had in Tomb, reducing the cooldown of Army, I believe it was. It just really led to some interesting gameplay where you'd be looking at your Dark Arbiter, you'd be looking at your Dark Transformation cooldowns, you'd be looking at your Army cooldowns and trying to figure out how to align these in such a way to just blast every like 3 minutes or so. It was so good. I wish we could have that again.
Actually, real quick, did anyone raid? I was going to say, did anyone raid with multiple Unholy DKs in their raid during Legion? Does anyone remember after every pull, the Unholy DKs would start comparing how much damage their Arbiter did and how big their biggest crit was? Does anyone remember that? Oh man, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention the pre-pull shenanigans that were pulled in Legion as well, you know, just Deathgate and D&D pre-pull to generate RP for Arbiter.
I was going to say, you know, current Unholy, I'm actually a big fan. So I said that Antris Unholy was like my favorite, but current Unholy, I love it. I know a lot of people think it's like convoluted and annoying with the cooldown reductions, but coming from BFA, which I find is like the most boring Unholy single target there has been, Shadowlands is such a stark difference. Like currently, you can mess up royally and like it will ruin your DPS. And I like that. You have to be like, you need to know what you're doing in order to maximize. And there are a lot of min-max things where you have to take decisions on the fly. It all kind of comes together to make it Unholy quite a skill-based spec from my point of view. And that's what I like playing.
I'm curious then, Biceps, what do you think of the lack of Festamite with current Unholy then?
You know, okay, I say that BFA single target was the most boring Unholy. BFA Mythic Plus Jesus Christ, I love that.
Oh boy.
Because Vestamite just added
I've seen some shit, man.
Yeah,
oh my god.
remember the days?
Oh my
I was actually
God,
I was
man.
actually about to ask. That's like, since we're moving kind of like into a more present day Unholy, and I know Biceps likes the convoluted one, and I've found to my surprise that I thought I knew how to play Unholy back coming from BFA, and then I was like, wait a minute, why is my damage shit? And then I figured out, I was like, okay, there's a little bit more to talk about this. So if you guys can like talk a little bit about the Shadowlands version of Unholy, and obviously touch a little bit on Fester Might in the sense of, okay, why do we want Fester Wounds anymore? And, you know, kind of talk a little bit about that.
Continue what I said, that Vestamite was awesome in the 5th class. It added another dimensionality where you could leverage this kind of what we call funneling gameplay. You set up all those wounds on lots of targets, you burst them all, gives you a huge strength increase, and then you can funnel that with your single target cooldowns into a boss. And I'd really like to see that kind of gameplay. It's very smart. You have to plan it ahead of time. It's very rewarding when you set it up properly. It gives you a lot of damage. And we kind of moved on from that. Current Unholy isn't about that kind of setup. You are still rewarded for proper setup, you know, playing with bursting swords and infected claws is kind of the same thing, but it doesn't get the same distance as the Vestamite one. I also kind of like that we went away from the wounds being such a central system in single target. They're not as important anymore. They don't really matter. We're more about our cooldown rotations and setting those up, and I'm much more in favor of that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Bicep. Brings me back to a conversation that we had, I think, just before Shadowlands launched. We're talking about idealizing or getting the ideal cooldowns and stuff, and when you should hold what cooldown for what. We were talking about it, and you had just mentioned like, this is just complex. Coming from a guy who has a master in physics, it really took me back. But yeah, Unholy right now is very, very complex in its presentation, really. So you have to really try to sit down and figure out, okay, I'm going to have this cooldown at this time. We're going to have ads at this time too, or I'm going to need burst damage here. What cooldown should I hold for when? Should I try to align my cooldowns? Should I not try to align my cooldowns? There's a lot to it right now. And they're actually on the verge of several different really cool gameplay styles if they just added like one or two more little pinches of stuff in there, like Fester Might. Throwing that back in as a legendary could really make the Infected Claws Bursting Swords gameplay really engaging in Mythic Plus again. For example, for single target too. Right now we run Army of the Damned primarily just because it reduces the cooldown of our Apocalypse, but it also does something else, which summons Magus and reduces the cooldown of Army. But it kind of ends up serving the same purpose as Gargoyle, which sits at the sideline right now because they really kind of do the same thing. Big burst every 3 minutes or so. If they were to do something that buffed Gargoyle too, could see some interesting Gargoyle gameplay coming out again too.
I mean, you guys tend to all agree that Unholy is quite complex, and I'm gonna chip in here from the point of view of somebody who never played Unholy in his life, but really wants to get in, seeing all your goddamn passion and talking about it like this with so much love. So, what do you guys think? How easy is it to get into Unholy DK for a brand new player and start performing decently without necessarily min-maxing right from the get-go? What do you think the entry level is for brand new Unholy DK players?
I feel like you can play it easy mode. So sure, you can do a lot of optimizations down the line, but you can make some shortcuts which gets you like almost the entire way there. Like the whole complexity comes from Unholy Blight, Dark Transformation, and Apocalypse. 3 abilities which all synergize with each other, but all have different cooldowns. And that's where the kind of issue comes into play. If you're a new player, what you can opt to is just you always use Blight with Dark Transformation. Have that as like your main rule. You never use those separately. And then, just use Apocalypse whenever it comes up. It doesn't matter too much. And that kind of, that solves that problem for new players. Because that's kind of like 99% of what, 95% there. Not all the way, but it's sufficient.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with Biceps. It's definitely something that's easy to learn, hard to master, which is always good. And I'd say overall, the amount of complexity to min-max the dynamics is definitely much more easily digestible than it was in BFA, right? So, in my opinion, if I was to use game design terms, Festamite brought a dynamic which had a sort of ramp gameplay, where if there were several small adds that were dying at once, you could do a large amount of burst damage on a big ad without even using a single cooldown, if you were able to completely stack up your Festamite. The best example was probably Gahoon, in my opinion. So little like wormy things you could do. If you're in phase 1 of Gahoon, you could explode on a big ad, just have like a ridiculous amount of AoE if you're able to set up that ramp correctly. And I guess it's a bit interesting because it's different. It's very unique. And I guess you could say it's comparable to like a healer ramp when they're like trying to envelop a bunch of ads and stuff like that. But coming back to current day, it's definitely a lot simpler to keep going and master Unholy now than it was before. Just because I'd say it's definitely just more cooldown based. There's not really that like other complete dynamic with treating enemies as like objects to boost your damage and stuff like that.
Just to clarify, by the way, my comments were based on a raid point of view, so pure single target. Because I feel like that's the... Well, obviously Mythic Plus is also complex on a whole different level. You do different things. But for raiding, the cooldown alignment, that's a difficult thing. For Mythic Plus, it's about, setting up your burst properly, which is a different thing entirely. Maybe that's what makes it difficult sometimes, that you have different dynamics in Mythic Plus and raid, and there's like in Mythic Plus this whole thing of, how do you engage a pull, how long do you spend setting up, how do you then move into your burst window, that kind of thing.
Fair enough.
Also, my comment about aligning Blight and Dark Transformation doesn't entirely apply to Mythic Plus. If you play Mythic Plus Unholy, just use your cooldowns all the time. That's the best advice I can give to anyone.
Well, there you go. Heard it here first.
Press the buttons, works.
Yeah, man. What about the talents? I feel we didn't talk about too much about. We touched a bit on.
I wanted to mention
Gargoyle.
because also you guys mentioned the Gargoyle, and I know that's what was it? Wasn't it at one point in the beta when they made Gargoyle good, but then they nerfed it again?
It was baseline actually for a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, it was baseline.
What happened there? What was the reasoning? Why did they remove it?
Too many global cooldowns in the opener.
Yeah, basically we complained on the forums and they actually changed it.
Well, that's good.
If I recall, I think I might have said this as well in our beta coverage of Unholy. And I was like, I was counting the globals that I had to press until I could. Okay, now I can start doing damage.
Oh right, yeah. That was
it was pretty crazy. And also, I mean, a lot of people liked Gargoyle, and I think I played with Gargoyle with the. I think Dark Arbiter was a glyph, right? Or was it? That's how I remember.
Yeah, it's like an appearance change. Yeah, you talk to a trainer and they just change the appearance of Gargoyle to be an Arbiter.
And I remember, I think the only time I played Unholy with the Dark Arbiter was during the Mage Tower. I did the Mage Tower, but that was about it. And it was actually really cool. It was a really cool dynamic, and it felt like very. It felt right as an Unholy DK to have like the Gargoyle, and obviously I love Sludge Belcher, but we lost Sludge Belcher, so. But what do you guys think of Gargoyle, and how do you realistically see them bringing it back, or making it at least competitive with the other options on the last row?
So they have to be careful with this one, because what buffs Gargoyle also buffs Army of the Damned. That being Death Coil or Runic Power Spenders, whenever you have that ability up or it's on cooldown. So they have to be careful with this. I think the best way to make it viable would be to just increase its damage. Right now, it does roughly 80 to 90% of the damage of an army, but on about the same cooldown if you take Army of the Damned. So it really just doesn't have a niche right now. If they made it to where it did quite a bit more damage, like 120, 130% of the damage of an army in its duration, if it's played well, obviously, because it still builds up damage based on Runic Power spent, then we could really see a dynamic where you have a choice between Army of the Damned if you want to try to sync your apocalypse with the Unholy Blight and try to get all that complexity in, or you could go with a little bit more of a simple style with Gargoyle where you could take Convocation of the Dead still and get your cooldown of Apocalypse down to about 60 seconds. Unholy Blight and Dark Transformation being around a 50-second cooldown. It works out fairly well. And then you could have some massive bursts every 3 minutes. But it's a lot more predictable than Army of the Damned because sometimes you just can't get enough global cooldowns out or spend enough runic power to get it up when you want it.
I'd say Sire is probably a good example of that, yeah? With all the amount of stops that there is in that fight.
Yeah, exactly. Sire would be a great fight for slightly buffed Gargoyle to perform really, really well on. It also brings a really interesting gameplay dynamic too, where every 3 minutes you're trying to set it up to where you can Unholy Blight, Dark Transformation, and pop your Gargoyle in a specific period of time to try to get that Gargoyle damage ramped up as much as you can. And it ends up being really cool because you're pooling runic power beforehand. You're trying to spend as much runic power as you can inside that window too, which also kind of leans a little bit more into that funnel kind of thing that Biceps was mentioning. If you have a couple ads and you need to funnel onto a target, if you're Venthyr, you got a ton of runic power at your disposal right there.
I'd like to mention that I feel like for Gargoyle to be competitive, it needs to be better than the other two options on pure single target. And this is because Gargoyle isn't very versatile. Its duration is very long, 30 seconds, and it requires this ramp up time. Like if you compare to Army you use, and as long as you have Blight up on your target, that's the damage you got from that. You don't need to kind of stay on the target, you don't need to spend your resources. It's very passive in that way. With Gargoyle, if you have to run out for mechanics, if you have to do anything else, it can mess up that cooldown quite significantly. And that downward risk needs to be compensated with an upward gain. So for you to actually make the choice, I'm going to run Gargoyle here, it needs to be a little bit better. And I feel like, I think a Dark Arbiter, that kind of, it was kind of like a very good duration. It ramped up nicely. Duration not too long, ramp up nicely so that you felt that it was impactful. Currently Gargoyle is too long and the ramp up doesn't feel impactful. And that's a negative.
Yeah, definitely agree there. If they were to produce it down to 2 minutes and then 20-second duration again, I feel like it would fit in very nicely with the current setup.
And maybe they can just change the default look of it to look like a Dark Arbiter, and then we just call it Gargoyle, but it's actually Dark Arbiter again.
We all know what it is.
So definitely, and while we're still talking about the talents, there are a couple of dead talents, and a couple of talents like I don't know. I feel like they might have worked a little bit better with the Fissure Might, and now that I look at the talents, I'm like, okay, well, Fissure Wounds are not really that great. Like Pestilence is one example, and I feel like Soul Reaper is so good right now that anything on its row is kind of pointless, and I think like, when talking about the general talent design and general balance, how do you make the Soul Reaper row, for instance, competitive while maintaining Soul Reaper still valid and not just nerf it into the ground? Because I have to admit, I didn't like it at first because I like the rune control that it provided in BFA, but having an execute is kind of like a different dynamic that Unholy didn't have before, and it feels like it's a nice thing to add. But how do you make that row still interesting, or at least competitive?
So I actually have a counterpoint to that. In PvP, for people who are trying to make Unholy work, because Unholy is quite garbage in PvP right now, we're still trying to actually toss up that row. We actually don't know what to run. There is a decent toss up between Pestle and Pastorals and Soul Reaper. Yeah, so basically in PvP, if you're going against, in like 2s, for example, if you're up against like a Disc Priest or a Holy Priest, you really just want to stack up necrotic wounds as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that is with a haste build of running Pestilent Pastorals in your burst windows. So they still serve a purpose, but I think in PvE it's just completely outshined by the execute. Yeah, I agree with that.
I think the easiest solution is make Soul Reaper baseline. It kind of makes a lot of sense. You shouldn't opt into an execute. And then just replace that talent with Plague Leech. So something that is actually a resource generator on a resource generating row. Soul Reaper is like odd one out. The fact that it gives a rune corruption if it kills the target, that doesn't make it a resource generating spell or talent. Just shop it out, make it baseline, and then put in something that makes it a meaningful choice when it comes to resource generation.
Yeah, I definitely see that there, because the only way they'd be able to make that row competitive is to buff the living heck out of the other two options, and that leads to some dangerous situations too. You buff, what is that, Harbinger of Doom, I think it is? Old Double Doom, basically. But you buff that too much, and you end up in a situation where you can get your army cooldown to like a minute and a half, and then that's just broken.
All right, I got a curveball for you guys. What if we swapped out? So we made Soul Reaper baseline. We put Unholy Assault where Soul Reaper currently is, and we brought back Necrotic Plague on the level 50 row. What do you think?
I would not go for that right now, because Unholy Assault is a 75-second cooldown. Apocalypse is a default 75-second cooldown. Unholy Blight and Dark Transformation are around a 45 to 50-second cooldown. And you just end up in this situation where if that row's set up like that, you're trying to do cooldown gymnastics in your head times 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is indeed
I
true.
think yeah.
I like the idea of Necrotic Plague, but I feel like we need to take a closer look and not make like a tiny change, just bring it back in for it to be viable. Like, I feel like the spec as a whole needs to revolve around Necrotic Plague instead of having it like, you can pick this up as one build and then nothing kind of synergizes with it. I feel like it might just fall flat.
What's the talent that when you put Death and Decay down, it has a 10% chance of putting a Fissure wound on? Isn't that like a dead talent?
Wait, is that still in the game?
Yeah.
It's terrible. Yeah.
It is.
I mean, outside of the Fissure Might mechanic, like, is there any reason why, if would you be able to buff that in any respectable manner, that would actually be competitive, or just be like a stupid thing to buff? Because I don't find it interesting unless wounds are actually something that you really want to manage, that actually have an importance. So I mean, at this point, why not just replace that with, I don't know how Necrotic Plague would work on that row, but at this point, like,
well, that one's a little bit more tricky, because the only really good way to make it competitive is to increase its proc chance significantly and remove the cap it has on wounds it's able to apply. Because right now it'll only ever apply 10 wounds, period. If you have 50 enemies, you get 10 wounds out in the first tick, you're done. It doesn't do anything else after that point. So they really need to remove the cap on wounds generated and increase the amount of increase the chance of wounds being generated while it's down massively for it to be able to compete with Unholy Pact, because Unholy Pact is just so strong right now. Tons of tons of shadow damage from the chains, and then you have a strength buff on top of it. It's just nothing's going to compete with that unless it's stupidly strong.
What if they bake Fester Might into it somehow, and then just balance the numbers out?
You really want that Fester Might?
That's a solution, yeah.
It was really fun in AoE, man.
Like, Fester Might in the talent tree would reinforce the already running Infected Claws Bursting Source build in a very fun and interactive way. So I feel like that's definitely a possibility. If we replace Pestilence with Fester Might, that it has a very large probability of actually being run in a Mythic Plus setting. We talk like the wound build is gone, like you don't play it, but running Infected Claws, Bursting Source, and Unholy Assault is definitely a viable strategy in a specific set of scenarios. It brings a ton of AoE damage, and it can help your group if you're lacking AoE.
And like,
Definitely.
if we see a council fight in like a different tier where there's like 4 targets at once or something like that, that build will just be absolutely nutty. Like, in all honesty, the amount of clear damage will be ridiculous. I was going to say though, even if we change the 45 talent row, there's still Defile sticking out like a sore thumb, which, yeah, Defile's also pretty bad. I'm surprised it's still in the game.
I feel like they've tried to make Defile work, because if you look at Night Fae and Death's Due, there are a lot of going in there, you're thinking, here's some interesting synergy, right? You have the strength buff where you can roll with Defile if the duration is long enough. that kind of thing. And it looks very strong on paper. Actually, with the new legendaries, the new Nightfade legendary, it makes Death Steal buff last for 12 seconds. This makes it technically possible to run that legendary and get the permanent strength buff. However, it's a very tight window, so I don't feel like it sees practical play. But, I still feel like they kind of tried to the whole thing with Death Steal is kind of geared towards Defile being like an option to play. However, it's just not strong enough.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I was actually doing some theory stuff on Defile yesterday, actually, trying to see if the changes that we're looking into in 9.1 would make Defile like actually good at competing with Pact, but it's not quite there. It's actually really close though. So Defile can be a viable build option in Mythic Plus. It's just very, very finicky. Because Defile itself actually does a pretty decent chunk of damage. It's over a single Scourge strike and damage for the same rune cost per enemy, and it's uncapped. So you're looking at large AoE packs. It's got some potential, but yeah, I didn't find anything that made it better than Unholy Pact, but it was still within striking range.
Were you combining it with Pheromones, the legendary, for that? I'm curious.
I wasn't actually. That was just typical Night Fae, not Festermite, Frenzied Monstrosity, and then Defile. So, yeah.
Could be interesting.
If you guys remember Legion,
yeah.
Defile used to give Mastery. I feel like that kind of thing can definitely put it up there. Because another problem with Defile, even though it could be competitive in AoE, it brings nothing on single target. So they have to add something else, right, to make it competitive. But there's this whole idea that Defile could be this niche pick for Night Phase, and then you have Unholy Pact for most of the people, and then we could have Festermite for the wound build in AoE, and that would make that talent row like interesting and exciting, I feel like.
Yeah, see, I'll tell you what I think will make Defile interesting again. Giving it back to Blood and just giving it that 10% DR that it had back on WoD. So like back on WoD, when you took Defile, it was like a level 50 talent, but it gave you like 10% damage reduction, which was pretty bad, but it was still, something interesting. I think the only way Defile can really work though is if they just over-design it and just give it like 5 different buffs that you get when you put it down. Like the only way to like make it work is to just over-design it, I think.
It's already pretty over-designed, man. You know how much work it took to figure out how that damage scales on it?
Yeah.
I'm seeing the ease that they had with putting Magus into the talent and making a lot of changes to the last row and adding Unholy Pact, like so many Azurite traits for Unholy they added into the talent. And I was always thinking like, why didn't they add Festermite? And I think maybe they just don't like the way that Unholy can scale. Because I mean they are the devs are pretty stubborn about certain things that they don't like. Obviously with the AoE cap that they added in Shadowlands, it makes it a little bit improbable that they will add Festermite to the spec in the way that it's scaled in BFA. Maybe that's why they didn't add it, because it felt like it was definitely, arguably the main Azurite trait that we had for Unholy in BFA. And like, why would they add Magus? Magus was fun and it's a nice flavor. Okay, I can see why they added Magus, but why did they add the chains, right? Why not Festermite? So I just leads me to believe that maybe their direction in terms of designing is not to let classes scale that much. Although that's why I felt like Unholy's was one of the better specs designed in BFA, at least in Mythic Plus, because you can pick it up as a new Unholy player and have some fun with it, maybe enjoy it. But if you really want to master it, if you really want to go that extra level, you can do some crazy shit. And I think that kind of rewarding playstyle is something that, at least for me as a never playing Unholy player, may be so interested in the space. Like, oh my god, so if you're telling me if I really work hard and learn this spec, I can just blow everybody out of the water. I mean, how many specs can do that, right? I can think of Fire Mage, but I think that's a little bit...
That's the ideal, I think, for a lot of the classes, right? As Ben just said, right? It's a good thing to like, easy to get into, hard to master, but once you do master it, it should really feel rewarding.
It has to be rewarding, man, because there's so many specs that are designed nicely, but if you master really well,
master Survival Hunter.
Yeah, it's and you're gonna do like an average Unholy DK. That's congratulations.
Yeah, that's
just bashing on survivals. Don't get you riled up right now. We love
survival. Just trying to point out that this is the thing, right? You take the time to master a class, but the feeling of effort to reward is not the same. and this is based on how much can it do once you like really play it to the max. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All classes should do similarly the same if they're played to their max, but that's not the case.
See, I might chime in here real quick. I think the dynamic of Festamite alongside current Unholy was just too complicated. And they could have put it in, but I think putting it in would have to take out some other dynamic. So like Gargoyle, for example, they would have to like take that out, which could work, but I think there's just a lot of complexity there already with the cooldown stuff, and they just want to like take a step back. I do agree with you though that for the people who did master that dynamic back in BFA, it is kind of unfortunate to see because it felt great if you really had a tight grasp on the fine aspects of the dynamic for Festamite regarding like ads and Mythic Plus, for example.
I can definitely see that fixed 20-second duration being extremely oppressive with the current lineup. Because, you know, Festamite on 20-second cooldown, you got Unholy Blight and Dark Transformation on a 50-second cooldown, and then you got Apocalypse on another cooldown. That would just add another dynamic, which would just be awful. I feel like you would have to ignore it because it would be very, very difficult to actually play around properly. But they can change it. Like rolling stacks, it's an easy solution, which would make it not that nasty lining up. When I say rolling stack, by the way, that essentially means that if you apply one stack, it has a fixed duration and then you just drop. And each stack has its own duration. So if you pop a lot of wounds at the same time, it kind of goes up a lot. And that's a nice thing. But then they don't all drop at the same time. They drop like one by one.
Yeah, kind of like how Iron Fur works for bears, I guess. You just pop one instance of a buff or debuff. It has its own separate duration. And that's actually not bad. It's an interesting gameplay because then you can maybe snap a point where you could have the max amount of wounds you can assume. Leads me to believe like kind of how you use Chains of Ice for Frost, where you just want to use it at the most amount of strength, and if it aligns well and you also get an Unholy god damn it, the rune force proc, I cannot
Unholy Strength.
Unholy Strength also on top of it is like that's a lot of damage, right? So rolling stacks as well sounds like it's like, oh, I will never get 13 stacks again, so let's just do something with the buff. That seems like an interesting thing, and it keeps the playstyle varied the way that they like to, because they like to add a little bit of RNG, and I can understand how RNG is viewed, because I don't know, does Unholy have any form of RNG outside of the Pestilence talents? I guess Sudden Doom. That's about it. And it's fine. I think Unholy is maybe one of the only specs that they managed to design really well without RNG, because I'm thinking about Boomy, that had almost no RNG this tier, and although damage notwithstanding, the rotation is fun, but it gets stale really quick because it's the same thing. It's you do the same thing over. Marcel doesn't like Boomkin. It's fine, man. They're holding the funeral. It's fine.
I know. It's all good. It's all good. I was just going to say, because we're getting closing to the end. Just in terms of other stuff in 9.1, is there anything you guys would like to touch upon, or have we covered everything from the information that has currently dropped?
Or maybe something you would like to see added or fixed?
Yeah.
Can I beat the dead horse regarding legendaries? Because I thought of something really cool before. Okay, so here's a redesign for Abomination's Frenzy. You change the procs it gives. So it gives something for blood, it gives maybe like killing machine procs for frost, and it maybe sudden doom procs for Unholy. Maybe it applies Festamite to like nearby targets, I don't know. Or maybe it gives like your pet like a rolling dark transformation buff or something like that. I think something like that could be a lot more interesting, because it doesn't make it less powerful, it just makes it more interesting. So I think that's definitely where they should be going regarding changing the legendaries, at least.
Yeah, I agree with you there. For Unholy, it's kind of tricky, because if you give it Sudden Doom, it just scales wildly better in AoE, which is kind of the niche of the legendaries anyway, so it'd probably be fine.
I'm very happy with current Unholy. I feel like we don't need anything changed in 9.1. If it's the same thing in 9.1, I'll be very happy. no worries at all. I'm fine with the new legendaries not being strong because I like the old ones. I'm fine with the new Soulbind system because it kind of just reinforces the ones we picked before. Actually, small comment there. M&I is not looking too strong, so the whole M&I versus Airmare debate might be solved in 9.1. Currently, we have this very, like, somewhat, I wouldn't say annoying, but you can pick M&I or Airmare. M&I kind of is nice because it buffs your raid, right? But it doesn't bring you as much personal DPS. Airmare brings you personal DPS. And everyone sees Airmare logs, and it's kind of like, do you want to be better for your raid, or do you want better for yourself? And that's sometimes a tricky choice to make. So 9.1 might remove that choice, and we can just run Airmare to bring the most personal DPS as we want. But yeah, overall, very happy with the spec. Excited to play 9.1, but didn't expect too much changes. And I would be happy if there aren't too many changes either.
When it comes to the 9.1 stuff for DK, the only thing that's really interesting to me overall, I kind of brushed on it earlier, is the third potency conduit scaling with Frost. Breath doesn't get a whole lot from it, but then Obliteration gets so much from it. It actually puts it to the point where Obliteration in single target could very well outperform Breath of Sindragosa. And really, really interesting because, banter. So I was doing some testing the other day.
You got that right.
This is kind of why
I need to
this
read
is
the
why I
channel,
mentioned
dude.
Pelagos earlier. I mentioned Pelagos earlier because it works insanely well with Obliteration. You have your 1 minute massive mastery buff. You now have the 3 potency conduits, which, Obliteration benefits a ton from. Then you have that new ability, that random strength buff, 12% strength, which is multiplicative with Pillar, Unholy Strength. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that could happen with Obliteration for Kyrian going into 9.1. It could very well be one of the best single target DPS in the game, given that you're able to take advantage of it. It's kind of nuts.
I don't want to be a Kyrian DK,
We
man.
might just do another soon enough Frost DK episode again, right?
Hey, I'm always down for some good vibes,
Oh, for sure, man. For sure.
I will say that in PvP, Unholy needs help. Oh my god. Unholy is in a very sorry state for PvP. At the very least, Necrotic Strike should be baseline by now. Like, holy crap. If I can put in a wish list for Unholy, I want a Festamite tier set. I think I just want to see it back, man. I just want to play it again. It was such a fun dynamic.
Please no more CDR in tier sets, Blizzard. I beg you. My sanity can only take so much.
I bet you they'll bring like a tier set for Frost and it just like reduces the cooldown of Pillar of Frost or something dumb like that.
We already got Ice Cap, man. That would be
100% uptime on Pillar of Frost confirmed.
Oh, Pod.
8.3 again.
You're literally a 2-button rotation. You press like Howling Blast and you press the Obliterate.
imagine just continuous obliteration. It just
Oh god, no. Obliteration does so much damage in its windows, that would be broken.
We're actually getting to the end a little bit, and we talked about Necrotic Plague back, but just to keep it in touch with like how we end these podcasts. If you were to, like Marcelian obviously put it, if you were to design like one new talent or ability for Unholy, or we can talk about bringing stuff back.
That's part again.
It's that part. It's like get those brain juices going. What would you add to the spec, either as a talent or as an ability, legendary or whatever, something that would be really cool to have?
From my point of view, in BFA, I was sorely lacking some kind of interactivity with the pet damage. I go back to this again and again. BFA sucked for Unholy, but I'm gonna say it again. Everything from your pets was just completely passive. You pop it off, and then you have no interaction with it at all. Now in Shadowlands, we got Unholy Blight, and that is great just because of this. You can buff your pet damage, and that just makes it feel a lot more interactive. I was gonna say to bring back, those Legion Shoulder Legendary, which buffed your pet by 40% whenever you press Dark Transformation. But at the current state of the game, I don't feel like that's needed anymore. In BFA, it was very much needed, but Shadowlands, we got Blight, and I feel that's sufficient. I'm gonna say remove Pestilence and put in Festamite. I feel like that would be very interesting and reintroduce a very fun gameplay. With a caveat of using rolling stacks, otherwise it's gonna be awful. Not awful, but annoying to a high degree.
So I've actually already thought about this a ton. And my ideal would probably be in a situation where Necrotic Plague is already back in the talent tree. Necrotic Plague, right, if it was put back in right now, it would feel a little bit out of place because you'd have to incorporate the extension to it by popping Festering Wounds, most likely, because Festering Strike right now doesn't extend the duration of our diseases, anything like that. So the only situation I can see where playing that kind of situation, it gives a purpose for wounds, by the way, which is nice, but only benefit I can see to playing that type of situation would be if you were to incorporate Ebon Fever, I believe it's called, our tier 30 talent, something like that, second row, right next to Unholy Blight, giving you the option to reduce the duration of Necrotic Plague, but increase its damage by, I think it's 30%. Allowing you to really incorporate that skill-based gameplay into Necrotic Plague, where you're really trying to extend its duration, but it's also still doing tons of damage without having to rely on Unholy Blight, which is what was used to build it up back in WoD. With that in mind, it kind of leads to 3 different paths you could take down the talent tree too. If you're going for a more pet-oriented setup, you have, your All Will Serve, you have your Unholy Blight, you have Army of the Damned or Gargoyle, depending on what you wanted to do. Then you have the wound-based setup where you're going Infected Claws, Bursting Sores, and Holy Assault. Or if you're going Necrotic Plague, you have the option of going, Ebon Fever, Clawing Shadows, and then all the way down you have Necrotic Plague. Gives you 3 separate playstyles for Unholy, all within a single talent tree, which would be really cool in my honest opinion.
I just thought of one thing. This is more, again, a bit of a wish list thing. Fix Control Undead for Unholy. It doesn't work properly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is a curveball. This is something I thought of ages ago. Delete the rune system and bring in a mix and match system instead. That way, we'd finally be able to actually use. Oh god, what is the Rune Forge called? That applies like the pet debuffs.
Apocalypse.
Yeah,
Rune of the Apocalypse. Yeah, that way we can actually finally use that.
All the mix and match.
But yeah, Rune Forge changes. We've been using Fallen Crusader for like 15 years now. 10 years.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. You have, say, 3 different choices and you can mix and match whatever ones you want. And then when you spend that rune, that effect is maybe disabled for the period while it's recharging.
Now I understand. So you're saying you replace the default runes and then you pick them out of your rune forges in a way. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, so you have like a damage component, a utility component, and then like a defensive component. And you get a pick like out of the 3 components. So like one component would have like Stone Skin's Gargoyle versus Sanguination. One would have Fallen Crusader versus Apocalypse. And then another one would have like some third thing. Spell Warning versus something, I don't know. And there's like design room there as well. So they can it's very easy to invent new ones because it's not homogeneous design. When it's like a part of something, it's like the same thing that the essences were.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
they instantly added, what is it, 3, 4 extra Rune Forges just in one patch? I mean, in 9.0, right? Going from Gargoyle, Fallen Crusader, and Razor Eyes. So now we have 3 more, right? 4 more?
It's like 4 more, yeah. Apocalypse, Sanguination, Spell Warding.
Hysteria.
Yeah, 5 more, actually.
Yeah.
So I mean, they just vomited 5 extra runes out there they're pretty much underwhelming. Like some of them might see play, like, but well, all right. Well, I hope the devs are watching. Like, hey guys, hey look free brainstorming.
Exactly. Yeah,
not part of.
Yeah, here's your idea for next expansion.
Take it from here, guys. I mean, I know it's wishful thinking, but I really do hope at least some of these devs. But they're getting a little bit of information, at least from the players and actually people who take the time to like look at all the things and have the experience and see exactly how it goes. I'm hopeful for that actually, but I think we can safely end it here because some of the boys really need to get going out to other places, and so do we. That being said, first of all, check out, Banter on his Twitter and on Icarus as well. Its links is going to be in the description. Taze also in Icarus, and obviously Biceps on YouTube and Twitch, as well as in Icarus. I think this has been a great discussion. I'm actually, for the first time in my life, thinking about getting back my DK and trying out Unholy. I mean,
Last time we played Frost,
Man.
right?
We hyped it up, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's I was really, I don't know if bought and sold by Biceps actually, because he really made like a strong argument that Unholy feels kind of good and complete in Shadowlands. I never played it before. So that's a win for me. I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah.
I just hope, because I'm that type, probably like you as well, the type that really wants to get into the max level of play of it. And if I'm not be able to do that, I'm just going to drop it so hard. Oh man. But it was pretty cool, and thank you guys for.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so fun nerding out, guys. And if you guys like the Unholy, you should definitely check the Frost DK podcast. It's up on our channel. It's everywhere where we have podcasts. There's some cool topics going on about that, and we're probably
check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, all of the places, Google Podcasts. We're all over the place. If you want to listen to it, or you can check out the video as well. It's good. We shall see you next time with a brand new spec. I think it's either Feral or Bear, but I think Feral is going to be the first on the line. So stay tuned, because you cannot quote me on that. Not yet. Okay. Thanks so much for listening, for watching. You guys have a great week ahead.
take care.
Bye.
/bow. Still I play WoW. Still I play WoW.